Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to do some prep for Secret Invasion and look at who might be a Skrull in the MCU. Now, Secret Invasion is coming out in spring of 2023, so it's right around the corner. And that means it's a perfect time to look at who might be a Skrull inside the MCU. So let's dive right in and see what we can find out. One of the first things we might want to look at is what do we know about Skrulls? And the Captain Marvel movie told us a lot about how Skrulls operate within the MCU. We learned that the Skrulls can simulate or sim someone down to that individual's DNA. We learned that they can sim organic and inorganic matter. There was a joke about turning into a file cabinet at one point. We learned that they can sim things that are bigger or smaller than their own size. There's a joke about turning into a cat at one point. They can only sim someone's recent memories, and that's important. They can't sim somebody and then know their life story. They're only going to know at best some of their recent memories. They can sim someone's appearance, but not their powers. And that might be one of the most significant things we learned. You know, Captain Marvel proved she was not a Skrull by firing off a blast and destroying stuff in the bar. So at least at the time of Captain Marvel, which was in the mid-90s, there was not the Super Skrull, which is something from the comics where they had where a Skrull could literally duplicate the Fantastic Four's powers, or there was no other genetically altered Skrulls that could create superpowers. That doesn't mean they won't exist by the time of Secret Invasion, but I kind of think Marvel's going to keep it that they don't have superpowers. We'll see. But anyway, very significant that at least in 1995 timeframe, they did not have that ability in the MCU. And then we also learned that if they are badly injured or, of course, dead or killed, they will revert to their true form. There was a Skrull that was shot and badly injured that turned back into their Skrull form. And, of course, another Skrull that died and turned back into a Skrull. So that's important. And then what strategies might Skrulls employ? Because this might give us an idea of who is or is not a Skrull. It's important to realize they would very much want to gain access to a powerful organization. And there's several organizations in the MCU. New Asgard, Stark Industries, Pym Tech, Damage Control, FBI, NSA, Hydra, Wakanda, S.W.O.R.D. I mean, so many powerful organizations, and they would probably very much like to infiltrate those orgs. Now, they don't have to be the head of the organization. They could just be someone who has access to the good information, and that's important. Maybe they will be the head, but as long as you're someone close to the head, that's good enough. And this is important. They don't have to have always been simming someone, but may have done it more recently. And what I mean by that is maybe one of our favorite characters turns out to be a Skrull. Well, that doesn't mean they've always been a Skrull. You know, one of the big mysteries is not just who's a Skrull, but how long have they been a Skrull. So lots of dynamics on how this is all going to work out. And so along that same line, just because someone turns out to be a Skrull doesn't mean the real person is actually dead. The Skrulls may have captured someone. They may be off in the basement somewhere tied up. But it doesn't mean they're dead. So just because one of our favorite characters turns out to be a Skrull doesn't mean we won't get that character back. It just means we got to find them. They got to figure out where the Skrulls are hiding them. And then again, how long have they been a Skrull will be interesting. Someone can't have been seriously injured while simming someone. So a Skrull who was taking the form of somebody and then was shot again, like we learned in Captain Marvel, probably means they weren't a Skrull. So that can eliminate certain people because there have been people who have been badly injured over time, like Nick Fury and like Rhodey. Certainly if they were people who were being simmed, it would have to be after those injuries. It couldn't have been before. So that kind of helps us figure out timelines again. And then the blip, I think the blip will have been a time frame where Skrulls really use that chaos to take over several of these organizations, or to infiltrate, I should say, several of these organizations. And that's why it's really interesting that the blip, the 5-year period, will be explored during Secret Invasion. At least that's the rumor. That would be really cool. So if we take these strategies and these things we know about Skrulls and apply them to the MCU, let's see if we can figure out who might be a Skrull. Obviously, Nick Fury and Maria Hill have been revealed at times to have been impersonated by Skrulls. So the real question with them is, when were they Skrulls and when were they, not? When were they actually themselves? One very big possibility is that after the Winter Soldier and the fall of S.W.O.R.D, and after Fury, of course, was badly injured, that's when he took off to go to space and work on S.W.O.R.D, which may have already even been started long ago, but went to take it over certainly, with S.H.I.E.L.D. gone. And that after that point, Talos took over Fury. And so every other time we've seen him, potentially after the Winter Soldier, it could have been Talos. So, for example, in Age of Ultron, was that Fury or was that Talos? Now, that theoretically, they gave us a hint because in Captain Marvel, Fury said he can't eat his toast if it's cut diagonally. And in Age of Ultron, he eats a sandwich that's been cut diagonally. But then again, someone mentioned, well, that's a sandwich, not toast. Probably they weren't getting that detailed, but still, it is interesting that he said toast and then this is the sandwich. So Marvel may just be totally messing with us on that Easter egg. But still, the question is that Fury or is that Talos? And then again, when Fury was blipped at the end of Infinity War, was that Talos or was that Fury? I'm going to guess at least by this point it was Talos because, again, Fury's been rumored to appear during the 5-year blip period in Secret Invasion. But another possibility, I guess, is that really was Fury. And then when he came back in Endgame, that's when finally he said, I'm done. I'm out of here. Talos, take over. So it'll be very interesting to learn more about when Fury and Maria Hill were replaced. And when they were them and when they were not. So then we look at S.W.O.R.D and damage control. S.W.O.R.D definitely has some good Skrulls infiltrated into it. The Skrull at the end of WandaVision that told Monica Rambeau, hey, Fury wants you up top. In other words, S.W.O.R.D. So definitely a good Skrull working with Fury. And then I would argue Haywood was just sketch from the beginning to the end. And, it's interesting. He might have been replaced before he was even the head of S.W.O.R.D, when Maria Rambeau was the head. And, of course, she gets cancer and dies, and suddenly he's thrown in to be the head of S.W.O.R.D. Very interesting, right? So if you then look at how crazy he acted at the end of WandaVision, willing to kill Wanda's kids just to not get caught, that could be, a human who's very arrogant, but it also could be a Skrull who desperately wants to keep their position of power. So I don't know. I kind of think he's a Skrull. Then you look at damage control, and you got Agent Cleary, who, when asked in No Way Home by Peter Parker, hey, Fury will vouch for me. He says, hey, Fury's been off-world for a year. Well, how would he know that? Unless he was a good Skrull working with Fury. So I actually think Cleary is going to turn out to be a good Skrull. And then you got Deaver. Man, in Miss Marvel, she was trouble. Kind of like Haywood, desperately trying to hold on to her position of power and to use that position of power to gain knowledge and gain access to technology and powers and Miss Marvel and her friends, etc. So wouldn't it be interesting if they were both Skrulls, but one was a good Skrull, one was a bad Skrull, and neither one knew the other one was a Skrull? Wow, that would be wild. So then you got Stark Industries. Certainly possible. Pepper Potts could be a Skrull. Many people have rumored that for a long time. I mean, it'd be a very important position of power to be Pepper running Stark Technologies, Stark Industries. However, what's interesting is they've now had a kid. Tony and Pepper had Morgan. So was she a Skrull then? I don't even know what to do with that. I'm just going to leave that on the table. That would be weird. It would work. Skrulls sim you down to your DNA. So certainly she could have birthed Morgan if she was a Skrull. But wow, anyway, we're going to leave that on the table. I think more likely is Happy Hogan, because especially if you look at how bizarre Happy acted both in Far From Home and No Way Home, especially in No Way Home, where he stashed all that Stark technology in his apartment. What on earth was that all about? And then you look at the fact that out of nowhere, he's suddenly dating May Parker. That's kind of suspicious. Maybe what really was going on is he did that so he could get access to Spider-Man, Peter Parker. And likewise, he already had access to Stark Technologies. So, man, what a powerful person to take over. So my guess is that he is indeed a Skrull. The question is exactly when did he become a Skrull, but certainly interesting if he were one. So then you got Pym Tech, and Hank Pym is certainly a likely candidate. Would be very powerful person to take over from a knowledge standpoint. You get access to his Pym particles and all the knowledge he has. But I think it'd be more interesting if someone like Luis was a Skrull. He wouldn't have been a Skrull right off the bat, because how would a Skrull have known Scott Lang was going to go anywhere? But after, Scott Lang became more famous and it was more clear that he had access to all this information, taking over Luis would make sense. Now, we all love Luis, so it'd be horrible to have him, killed or something. But again, remember, just because a Skrull takes over somebody doesn't mean they're dead. In fact, wouldn't it be an epic scene if they find the warehouse where all the, kidnapped and replaced people are being kept? They take that gag off Luis's mouth, and immediately his little theme music plays, and he goes through a long, drawn-out, and unnecessarily detailed explanation of his capture. Classic. Would be classic. So I'm actually voting for him to be a Skrull. That would be awesome. Then you have government agencies. So you look at Wu, who might well have wanted to use his position. A Skrull might want to use his position and replace him in the FBI. You got Everett Ross in the NSA. That would be a very important person to replace. And then there's Secretary Ross, which, unfortunately the actor has passed away that plays him, which was really a bummer, tragic. But so that could alter any plans that maybe they had for him. But he could be a Skrull. That would be a very interesting choice because he certainly was trying to amass power and control the superheroes. And theoretically is going to help create the Thunderbolts, or was going to. We'll have to see how that all turns out. But 3 very interesting candidates for being Skrulls. Then you got Wakanda. It would be very powerful to have somebody infiltrated in Wakanda. Shuri is a possibility, but because she's so smart, a Skrull couldn't really duplicate those smarts, it seems, or certainly wouldn't have all of her past knowledge. So it might be tricky to continue to impersonate someone who they expect to be coming up with all these technological ideas. On the other hand, Queen Ramonda, she might be a very good candidate. She was in charge, very likely in charge of Wakanda during the 5-year blip, because Shuri was gone, and of course T'Chaka was already dead, and the Black Panther, T'Challa, was blipped. So with Shuri and the Black Panther blipped, she's now the most powerful person in Wakanda. Very interesting. Would be a smart one for them to replace. And then there's Nakia. I think Nakia would also be a smart one to replace. She's got a lot of connections with important people in Wakanda. Another possibility, of course, is Okoye or any of her team. But because they're such skilled fighters, and they all work together so well, I kind of suspect it isn't going to be someone like that. And there's one of these 3, if it's anyone. But still, that's another possibility. Okoye is a possibility. Then you got New Asgard, which of course wouldn't have been at play until after Endgame, but impersonating Valkyrie certainly couldn't maybe do all her fighting skills and strength, but you certainly could be bored Valkyrie sitting there in the meetings. But yeah, you got all kinds of access to the Norse technology and the knowledge that they would have brought to Earth. Very, very powerful position. But another possibility, how about Korg or Meek? That would be pretty funny. Again, they're not gone for good, and it wouldn't be until that New Asgard, came to Earth. But yeah, that would be hilarious if Meek turns out to be a Skrull. So a couple possibilities there in New Asgard. Then you got shady hired hands. Mitchell Carson from the first Ant-Man movie, walking off with those Pym particles. Hydra agent. He would be a very interesting choice. And then you got Sonny Birch from the second Ant-Man, who was trying to get all that technology. We don't know who he was working for, but maybe he's a Skrull. Then you got Shady Organizations. Now, Xialing is interesting. I don't know that I would have thought that she was, a Skrull at first, but there at the end of the movie, when she suddenly takes over the 10 Rings, that would be interesting if she actually was a Skrull, and that's why she decided to get the 10 Rings up and going again. You got Val, who I kind of suspect won't be a Skrull because she's got so much going on with the Thunderbolts, but still would be a person of in a position of great power because she's building a very strong team. And then you got Sharon Carter. Now, actually, my vote of the 3 would be Sharon Carter because her turn for kind of to be villainous was believable. But I almost think more believable would be that she was captured and replaced by a Skrull who's now using her name and her position to get power. Because I don't know, I almost like that storyline better than I do her just on her own turning villainous. But anyway, the three more possibilities for a Skrull. Then we have non-powered superheroes. Because again, I just don't think they're going to introduce the ability for Skrulls to emulate superpowers, to sim superpowers, but you never know. But yeah, so you got Rhodey. He's got access to the government, obviously access to the Iron Man technology, and he's already shown his ability to change his shape. And seemingly no one noticed. Very suspicious, huh? No, I'm sure they're not going to make that canon, but it's still an interesting tie-in. Then you got Sam Wilson. He didn't take the super soldier serum, so he is just human. Now, he's really, really, really good with that shield and really good with the flight suit technology, but he still is human, so he's a possibility. And then you got Clint Barton, again, human, very, very good archer, but human. And if not Clint himself, Laura Barton. Laura Barton's another possibility. Again, you don't have to be the person. You can be someone close to the person. Plus, she's got S.H.I.E.L.D. access herself from her days at S.H.I.E.L.D. So very interesting. Couple more non-superpowered possibilities. And then what I just kind of call potpourri. You got Eric Selvig. I'm sure he has access to a lot of important government secrets because of how well respected he is and all that he's done to help. Melina. Granted, the Black Widow program is gone and destroyed, but still, she had a lot of information, and simming her might give them a lot of powerful information about what's going on with the Black Widows currently, because there are still Black Widows out there until they're all cured. So, very interesting choice. And then there's Zemo. I love Zemo. And, you got to look at the fact that those dance moves looked like a Skrull impersonating a human desperately trying to dance, right? It might explain. In fact, Zemo might be, that was a Skrull. I didn't do that. But yeah, Zemo might be an interesting choice. And then finally, we'll just throw out a fun one. But how about Trevor Slattery? Let's face it. He always seemed to be everywhere around important people, whether he was with AIM, in Iron Man 3, and of course, then he gets captured by the 10 Rings, so now he's there, and now that he's out, who knows what he's going to do next. So probably not a Skrull, but that would be fun. That would be a lot of fun. So there's a lot of ideas to consider. Let me know in the comments. Are there others that I didn't mention that you think might be Skrulls? Do you think some of these that I mentioned might be Skrulls? And if so, how long have they been Skrulls? So if you don't mind, like the video. If you haven't subscribed, you can do so. A lot more videos you can watch. And in the meantime, let's all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe.